Thank you for coming to what is kind of the afternoon slot when everybody's got a bit of a dip and they'd like to be enjoying the good weather outside. We hope we don't disappoint, make it worth your time. My name is Vicky Collins and I'm Associate Professor at the University of Reading, and I'm going to present today with my colleague.
So I'm Daniel Devane and I'm a lecturer in EAP at the University of Reading as well.
Mm-hmm. And our topic is making the case for a curriculum Infusion. We're linking academic course content to EDI, equality, diversity and inclusion topics. So the key things we're going to discuss is where is EDI embedded into our curriculum and where it isn't. In this context, it was looking at the needs of the academic needs of a UG pre-sessional English cohort, but the tasks we describe can be transferred to PG or PGR. We'll talk about how we designed the written task, so what EDI theme we identified, what tool for analysis, and what artifacts we developed to simulate the students writing a case study report. And some examples of students' realisation of the task and their perceptions, and then ending on the Q&A where we'd like to pose some questions on your reflections on embedding EDI into the EAP curriculum. So where is EDI in our curriculum? So as we know, we're very privileged to work in very diverse contexts with different groups of students and individuals. And I think we could all encourage our students from different cultural, ethnic and linguistic backgrounds to learn from each other, to share their experiences, which would be new to others and new to us. We also embed EDI because we consider the different diverse needs and learning preferences of our students. And I think most of us ensure now that the language, content and imagery that we use in our materials are reflective of the experiences, different experiences in the UK and internationally, in reflecting our diverse culture and identities. Now, these are just some of the responsibilities we have towards EDI, but we actually wanted to think about how do we ensure that the students are involved in a real-world task which demonstrates meaningful application of the academic language skills, as well as equipping them with the attributes they would need for participating in a diverse world. So this is the scenario I was faced with. Like most higher education institutions at the University of Reading, at school and university level, we have EDI champions or representatives. You might have different terms used in your institutions. And our own school diversity and inclusion representative approached me and said, where are the opportunities for integrating EDI into the pre-sessional English curriculum? Right, okay, that's another thing I've got to do when I'm redesigning the materials then. We've got to include EDI as a topic now. So we considered where EDI we thought was already addressed. And these are some of the areas we were reassured that we were already doing in our curriculum. And it could be that you're reflecting on your own provision and thinking, well, yes, you know, we're doing that with one particular program or with across different programs. So a lot of these are around creating. We realise that they're more about the processes of helping to foster an inclusive teaching environment, but we felt actually they didn't really contribute that much to teaching students about inclusion. So we felt that there were further opportunities for discussing aspects of diversity, inclusion, stereotypes, preserving fairness as a subject topic within the pre-sessional programme, as well as integrating this with the academic language skills they would need. So just to give you some context about the pre-sessional English programme design at Reading, in 2022 we redesigned the whole programme, and the programme takes a genre-informed, task-based, integrated skills approach. Our PSE programme spans 12 months. It's not just a summer programme. And here are the main aims of our redesigned programme. So it's about genre, and it's about exposing students to common and discipline-specific genres that they will encounter in the university. We are unable to differentiate much in terms of the disciplines we teach or the study level. So for most of the 12 months, the students are together. That's UG, PGT, PGR. And it's only for the last 6 weeks, PGR is postgraduate research, PGT, postgraduate taught. For the last 6 weeks, we do separate the postgraduates from the undergraduates. The postgraduates take a module in which the assessment is to write a critical review of 3 research articles in their intended discipline area. Okay, so the remit that Daniel and I had was, can you design the assessment and the supporting syllabus for the UG students? So what informed us was obviously to keep to the genre-informed approach of the principles of the whole programme. What were the disciplines that students were going on to, and how we were going to integrate this opportunity of putting in an EDI topic. On the next slide, we'll see where most of those students progressed to. I don't think there'll be many surprises there. There's some of you that will be similar in your context, perhaps, that a significant majority of our UG students progress to business and finance. Now, as a BALEAP accredited institution, we are acutely aware of the need for tasks to be highly contextualised and appropriate to the intending academic context. But obviously, we have to do that within the remit of it being an EAP rather than ESAP pre-sessional. So, given that most of our UG cohort were going on to business and finance degrees, research shows that these students will be exposed to quite a wide range of different genres on their courses, which can include, according to Nathan, so Philip spoke this morning, some of these genres. Now, already on the pre-sessional programme, we give our students practice of essays of various types. So we have 2 of the essays, the cause and effect and exposition discussion from the Nessie and Gardner sub-genres of essays. We already give them some practice, obviously not a complete dissertation, but they do write a mini research report which follows the stages, moves and steps of the main parts of a dissertation. So we saw that there was still a need then for these students to have practice at writing a case study report. Now, there are different categories of case studies that Nathan has researched, and our own case study that we developed had mostly the elements of a case study report, in that we included a section where they would have to write recommended actions, but we did not choose the students to write to a fictionalized audience. So sometimes you see in a case study report that they have to write, they are the consultant and they have to write their case study to the CEO of the company. We just remove that barrier for the UGs. So the characteristics of case report writing, as identified by Nathan. And also what guided our construction is the breakdown by Nessie and Gardner of what a case study report is, thinking about its social purpose, the stages that most case study reports contain. We know that it corresponds to a professional genre, it's not exclusive to business, and some examples there. So this research led us into thinking about how can we develop a case study report assessment for our undergraduate students on an EDI topic.
Okay, so this takes us nicely then to look at the specifics of the assessment we designed. And as assessment drives it to a large extent, the curriculum and instruction are now focused then on the specifics of our case study report for our pre-sessional undergraduate students. So a case study assignment requires students to analyse a real-world situation or problem and then develop recommendations for future action. The question we had to ask ourselves in designing this task was what situation is meaningful and relevant to the context and the cohort, as well as raising awareness of EDI-related themes. So we learnt from research on case studies by Nathan that writers must use academic knowledge and theory in analysis and problem solving. And in this specific example, they have to draw on business related knowledge. So the question we asked ourselves next was what business concept or framework would enable this analysis to take place. So as you can appreciate, this remap does present some creative challenges. There are many directions in which this task could go in, and perhaps some of the ideas you have are likely to differ from the final decisions that we made. So I will show you some of the decisions we made and explain the rationale for choosing them as well. So firstly, we decided to focus on employment, specifically recruitment and selection. The reason for this is because employment is heavily governed and regulated by EDI policies, processes and laws. And hopefully it is relatable to the students as well, as either they have either sought employment previously or they will be seeking employment in the future. Out of all the EDI characteristics we could have focused on, we decided to narrow it on gender, race and disability, as hopefully these three characteristics help to introduce students to EDI and are less controversial, so hopefully reconcile any potential barriers and existing stances the students may have based on the culture and backgrounds that they may be coming from. Focusing on some of the protected characteristics and not all of them as well is manageable for students and allows for easy refreshing of course materials as well in the future. So rather than redesign the whole module, we can just change the focus of the characteristics to update the materials as and when we need to. Within the case study then, we decided to focus on a university as they're hoping to come and study here, and that should already be familiar to them. But then specifically, we wanted to look at the university library. So the institution is obviously familiar, but then choosing a facility rather than an academic department mitigates any risks of potential parallels they may identify when they move on to their program of study. And out of the methods of analysis, we chose to use or introduce the students to a SWOT analysis. So this is a concept or tool which students encounter earlier on in their studies, but are surprisingly unfamiliar with. It's likely to be more familiar and less intimidating for EAP practitioners as well than other analysis models such as Porter's 5 forces. And then we ask students to focus on different perspectives as well. So here we have ethical, legal, and business. And this allows students to go deeper in their analysis, as well as fitting the case topic of recruitment and EDI. So for example, a decision or a stipulation in a job advert may make sound business sense, but that doesn't necessarily mean it is ethical or legal. So this slide outlines the exemplar we decide to simulate a case study report. Wickham University is obviously a fictitious university. Why Wickham, you may be asking? Well, anyone who's familiar with Jane Austen's Pride and Prejudice will know anything named Wickham is a bad omen. So creating a case study as well allows us to have some creative license as practitioners, and we can have some light fun with the materials as well. So although the practices are amplified in the case study materials we created, the scenario is factually based, and case artifacts, which I'll show you on the next slide, are closely based on authentic documents. We also looked at some examples of case artifacts on accounting and finance degrees, which are also fictitious but factually based. In total, we had 5 artifacts within our case study information. The first 3 are probably what I would define as core artifacts, and then the final 2 are additional to help support weaker students or students that need more direction to help them analyse the first 3. So the first artifact we had was a university and library profile. This gives students background context and an overview. We also created a job advertisement, and this is used to identify non-compliance with EDI principles and guidelines. We then have a more specific job description and personal specification, and again used to identify non-compliance with EDI and principles and guidelines. The additional artifacts, one is a library team photo. Students can hopefully see quite quickly from this that the team is dominated by one gender, by one ethnicity, pretty much. There's not much diversity being shown here. We can assume as well that the photo layout is hierarchical. So at the top we have Dick Tate, who is our library services manager, and then we have our library assistant at the bottom, Amira Saeed. I'd like to draw your attention to Sandy Beach, who is our second person. We can assume then if it is hierarchical, she is second in command, or at least with geriatric next to her. But if we look at their job titles, they do differ. So we have an assistant services manager versus a deputy services manager. Why do they have different titles? Could it possibly be because of their gender? Which one does make it sound more like an assistant, a secretary, rather than someone who is a secondary manager? And then finally, we have a letter of resignation, which created the vacancy that the job adverts were created for. And this allows students just to read through and say, what issues did this employee have? And are they replicated in the advert that has been created? I did have a lot of fun creating these names if you glanced through them as well. So from the artifacts, students will find out what Wickham University is doing well, so their strengths, and what they're doing wrong or not so well, their weaknesses, with regards to EDI only. There may be other things Wickham's doing well, so for example, good recruitment practices, but students should only scrutinise the artifacts with EDI in mind, no reference to anything else. This helps to narrow the task and keep it focused, but also allows us to see how well students are able to critically evaluate the information and how they can be selective as well. Afterwards, students need to identify the opportunities, so what potential there is for improvement, and the threats, what external factors may cause problems Wickham University has with regards to the strengths and weaknesses that they previously identified. They will then make recommendations for the university as to what they should do in future in order to improve or solve their problems and issues. So this was just the final task the students were given. I'll just let you read through that. I just want to draw your attention to 800 words. That is a typo. It was 1,000 words that they were asked to write. And then these were the measurable learning outcomes for this assignment. Okay, so I just quickly want to have a look at student realization of the task to finish with and the perceptions they had of this assessment genre as well. There's just some details on here. They're specific to our module, but just to give you an idea of the range of marks they got. The completion of this task was an aid to their progression for 85% of the cohort, and overall the progression rate from this module to their program of study was 96%, so relatively high in the grand picture. This first example then, I've just color-coded it for you. Those highlighted in yellow show where they've identified a strength or weakness. In the darker yellow is how they've created a link between the strength or weakness to an opportunity or threat. And then in the dark blue is where they're able to draw on the literature and show evidence of criticality in the points that they're making as well. So this example is an excellent example we had from a student last summer. They've synthesized strengths from case information and linked it to opportunities and supported that with EDI and recruitment knowledge and introduced criticality with references to the perspectives. And we can see that with the citations that they've included. This example is a satisfactory example. This student has attempted to address the task, but the points are relatively superficial. They only reference the case information and they don't make links to business, legal or ethical perspectives. So there is limited criticality here, but this student has shown they have understood SWOT analysis and attempted to apply it to their work. And lastly then, we have a good example from a student. So they've identified a strength with links to opportunities and critical comments. Some of the comments they make are unsupported and they have used a source that wasn't provided to them, but they were able to identify a source to support the point that they wanted to make. Elements are still slightly superficial and ungrounded, but there is a clear move and focus on criticality. So students were asked to reflect on the module and feedback how they felt it went for them and how it improved their skills. Having completed the module, they were asked how much more confident do they feel in starting their degree program, 1 being the same, no improvement, and 10 being a huge improvement in confidence. And on average, students rated their confidence as an 8.9, with the majority of responses being a 10. Students were also asked to give Likert scaled responses to 10 statements. In relation to the module, we can see here that the majority either agree or strongly agreed with the statements, and we only had 2 neutral replies on more subjective statements. And I just want to draw your attention to 4 statements in particular. So the module has helped me feel better prepared for my future studies. 69% strongly agree. I feel I improved my skills by taking the module. 75% strongly agree. I feel more confident using specific language and organizational structures to complete a case study, a 50-50 split on agree and strongly agree. And I feel more confident when applying a SWOT analysis to a case or real world example, and 63% strongly agree. Finally here, these are just some qualitative comments students made about the module, what surprised them the most. And these comments show how the students valued learning about SWOT and how to write a case study report, as well as thinking critically and making them aware of the differences in genres. It shows how they hadn't anticipated learning about this genre, but are happy that they did. We had one comment, if we were to believe it, she said everything was perfect, which I would take that with a pinch of salt. These are just a list of our references, if you would like to do any further reading. And then we've just outlined 3 questions for reflection or to facilitate some sort of discussion with you. So in your groups or people with you, I'd like you just to spend 5 minutes or so discussing one of these 3 questions, and then hopefully we can answer any questions you have or any questions that arise from your discussion afterwards.